This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 12, Episode 9. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network, brought to you by HK. Today is August 29th, 2025, as of recording of this episode, and I am your host, Riley Bowman, and I'm joined today by co-host Jacob Paulsen.
Yep, that's me. And Riley's the guy who's got a lot of guns on the wall behind him.
A few. There were more when we were filming our recent course. It's going to be released hopefully soon.
That is true.
Yeah. So look forward to that. I guess a little tease, but we got a video training course on shooting a red dot equipped pistol.
Yeah.
Hopefully coming out soon. It's being edited right now. So
Yep. It's coming.
We'll talk about all the things on the optics front with pistols. Bang, bang.
Yep.
Speaking of all fronts, today we're talking about major 2A news on all fronts. This is our first legislative updates episode in a couple of months, so our bad. Sorry. We got a lot to cover and a limited time frame to do it in. We'll do our best here. But first, we have a couple episode sponsors. I'll take the first one. I'll lean on you, Jacob, do the second one here. First up, Gunfighter Gun Oil. Been using that for a couple of years now. It's good stuff. In fact, just this last week was cleaning a couple of my guns and my son's gun, and that's the product I use. Gunfighter Gun Oil. They're cleaning super cleaner, I think it's called. It's good stuff. Cleans really awesome. But mostly, a lot of times I wipe things down, and I don't have to do a whole lot of cleaning because the lubrication that's on the guns is already, good enough. Like the old lubrication, wipe that off with the dirt and grime. Put more gunfighter gun oil back on the gun, and it's up and running in no time at all. So that's what I love about my gun maintenance, Jacob, is like make it as simple, as streamlined, as straightforward, as easy as possible. I don't like making it overly complicated for cleaning guns. That is, I make a lot of things in my life complicated, including for you, Jacob, but cleaning my guns is not one of them.
No comment. So no, yeah, I'm big believer. Love it. Good stuff.
Yeah. You can find Gunfighter Gun Oil on our site, but you can also go to gunfightergunoil.com and check out their products. Awesome stuff.
Yep. Our second sponsor today is Tactical RX. So I was looking to see if I had some Tactical RX glasses here behind me. I don't. So Tactical RX. These guys, three reasons why you should buy glasses from Tactical RX. One, they make the best quality safety glasses in the world, as far as I am concerned. I don't know if there's some standard that could measure that, but these are guys who, Tour de France riders wear their glasses, Olympians wear their glasses. They've been around for over 30 years making the best safety glasses anywhere. So in terms of quality, they're getting it done. Second, these guys do it cheaper than most. You just don't have to spend a fortune to get a really nice pair of glasses. I think that is at least in part because they just don't have the same kind of brand recognition. You're paying a lot for the swoosh on a pair of shoes. You're paying a lot for the little O on a set of glasses. And Tactical RX is not as well known, and so you're not paying some inflated amount for a logo that's printed on the side of the glasses. You can get quality without the price tag that you're used to. And third, frankly, I don't wear a prescription. Riley does, but I don't have a prescription. I don't have corrective vision needs. But these guys are the best. The founder over there, he's the first guy on this planet to figure out how to make a curved prescription lens that didn't make you feel like you're inside of a fishbowl. They really are the pioneers in this technique. What they do has been adopted. They not just like indirectly, but like directly has been adopted for other manufacturers. So these guys really know what they're doing, and they do a really good job, and it's really affordable. So go check out tacticalrx.com, whether you have prescription needs or non-prescription safety eyewear needs.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Jacob. That's an important thing to have quality eyewear. And so it's interesting that you said that they have riders on the Tour de France that wear their glasses.
I think they've had now over 30 Tour de France riders wear their glass. I could be making that up. I don't work there, so I can say whatever I want. Go verify. You can't sue them because I screwed that up. But it's some large number. Like they've had a bunch of Tour de France riders and Olympians wear their glasses.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal claim to have, and the Tour de France is going on, I think right now. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, let's get into the meat of our episode here today. We're here to talk about legislative news and updates, which typically means we are going to talk about some stories on the federal level. And then we will get into some state level information and news as well. There's a lot of big things happening. And frankly, this summer has been a really exciting time in the federal court system for a number of reasons, a number of things that are going on, cases and whatnot. And also just things like the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill a couple of months ago now, it was signed officially in July, so last month on July 4th, and coincidentally. And I think that's probably where we ought to start today. I mean, I think that's, at this point, that's a little bit old news, but we have to talk about it because we talked about the potential of that bill in our last legislative updates episode, Jacob, but it changed since we last talked about it. At that time, we were still talking about the fact that, the House has added into this bill the removal of suppressors from the NFA. And then that went over to the Senate, and that all got all kinds of blown up. They said, no, we're going to take out not just suppressors, we're going to take out all the things that we can.
Yeah, we're just going to get rid of it.
Short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns, any other weapon was on the table as well, and suppressors. And then, so I'm just giving everyone kind of the quick rundown in case you've been living under a rock for the last 2 months. But that all got completely blown up again when what's the name of her title? The Senate parliamentarian. There we go. That basically was like, hold on here, we can't be totally stripping these things out of the National Firearms Act because we were dealing with a funding bill. That was the ruling anyway. And there's, lots of opinions on both sides of this issue. But anyway, the cool thing, the way this is all settled out, in terms of settled in the dust, is the Senate was ready for this because they're like, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get rid of the $200 tax stamp, which is already existing Supreme Court precedent and rulings that have referenced the National Firearms Act as an example of how, you can regulate some things at times, particularly when there's a tax involved, because that's within Congress's powers to exact taxes. And you get rid of the tax. And now something that's constitutionally protected, like firearms and stuff, arms in general, it's up for grabs now. I think that's kind of the big news, is the way I'm reading this, Jacob. And I think a lot of people are talking about this, but I want to definitely hear your take on this, where you see this going with the One Big Beautiful Bill and kind of the fallout from that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a whirlwind because of the constant changes, and that was the frustrating part of this. It's like the House set out to do one thing, then the Senate changed it, and then we had to roll that back, and then we ended up doing this other thing entirely. To some degree, I kind of at the time felt like the Senate got greedy, and I don't know if it was intentionally serving something up that was probably bound to fail. I mean, it's one thing to convince people to vote for a bill that just deregulates suppressors a little bit. It's something else entirely for short barrel rifles and stuff like. Anyway, so I think that there might have been some weird strategy in there that's not very obvious. But yeah, where we're at, the tax is done. There's no more $200 tax stamp, but all the other regulatory things related to the NFA continue. Now, the other kind of perspective, and this maybe is getting to the question you just asked me, is that getting rid of that tax stamp serves up an opportunity, which is being taken advantage of by a whole bunch of pro-gun rights organizations, the NRA, GOA, ASA, SAF, FPC. They're all now basically suing the government about the NFA, basically saying the NFA is no longer constitutional. They're saying, hey, because of the way the bill was passed and it being a revenue bill and a tax bill, now that tax has been repealed, it's gone, it's done. The bill as it currently stands is no longer constitutional.
Yeah.
So perhaps there's an argument for the victory that was had, while it felt a little bit hollow from where we started, it did maybe put us in a situation where we're able to take the fight to the next level more clearly, more easily, more whatever, effectively.
Yeah. To those that are upset about the way it's gone down, I mean, the reality is, with the exception of, being able to get a House and Senate funding bill, government funding bill, in this case, through the reconciliation process. That's how a lot of these things get done these days, because almost everything else on the Senate side is subject to a filibuster, right? And so there's just simply is not the votes to just throw up like, as soon as the new administration and newly voted and sworn in House of Representatives got into office earlier this year, there was already bills that were getting put on the table of, hey, we'd love to, get the Hearing Protection Act or some variation of it passed and stuff like that. The reality is like the votes don't exist for that to happen in the current makeup of the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives. And so I think this was definitely a long shot as far as like getting even just getting suppressors, probably, like, I think through the eyes of the parliamentarian, getting suppressors removed from the NFA was probably a bit of a shot in the dark. Understanding what I know now, having read into it a little bit, and then of course, as you mentioned, I mean, the Senate was like, "Oh, let's go for the whole gamut." And I don't know what the strategy was with that either, other than I was applauding. I'm like, "Hey, cool, let's do it. Let's go for it." Yay. Let's get all these things totally off the NFA. But in the end, finding a method to potentially get those things stripped out of the NFA through some kind of federal court, Supreme Court ruling, maybe down the road, is still a big win. It's going to take a little bit more time, but I mean, I think there's a good chance with the current makeup of the Supreme Court, assuming it goes that far, which I would like to think that it should. This is a big enough of an issue. I think it'll get pushed through the courts, and there's enough cases going forward that it may very well end up at the Supreme Court. We're going to talk some more about some other cases the Supreme Court is, maybe one day taking up, and maybe not, because there's some other things out there pending. I mean, we're going to talk about, this next story that we have here, covering cases like Snope v. Brown, Ocean State Tactical v. Rhode Island. There's several circuit court cases that have been pushed up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is like, nah, we're not going to deal with that yet. And even Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh is on record as saying, we're not gonna take some of these, major, huge cases just yet, but probably you'll see a major assault weapons ban case in the next term or something like that. So there's some big things potentially coming down the pike at the Supreme Court level. And I'd like to think that a case like, this, dealing with this NFA stuff, will be one of those things that's handled, and it'll be monumental if it is, because once we had the Supreme Court handing down a ruling that says, yep, no tax, therefore these things get kicked out of the NFA, like, that's going to be pretty significant precedent. That'll be more difficult to overturn than, say, if just a law got passed that could then the next term and the next favorable Democratic Congress comes in that could just flip that right around. Now, that could still happen with putting a tax back, on NFA regulated items. And so that's one risk of where we're at right now. Any thoughts or further comments on that?
I just find it fishy and or just outright foolish strategy. Like, what happened, how it went down does upset me, because I think that we know we had the votes to just deregulate suppressors in the House because they passed it. And I think that the general counting of votes in the Senate looked pretty positive until the Senate said, you know what? Never mind on just deregulating suppressors. I want the whole thing gone. And all of a sudden, the votes started to disappear, and the parliamentarian comes in and says, "No way, no how." And so it felt like we shot for the stars. The Senate said, "No, let's go for a different galaxy," and we ended up at the moon. But that's how it felt to me.
I still don't think that we would have been able to get that through a filibuster at the Senate.
I mean, we'll never know is the short answer.
True.
But I was frustrated by how it went down. But I appreciate if the intent truly was to just like go further, get us more rights, then like God bless you. Too bad it didn't work out. But where this will take us next, we'll see. I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
I'm certainly grateful we're better off now than we were a year ago.
Yeah. To be clear, the tax, as was passed, the removal of the tax from NFA, that does not take effect until next year.
January 1st.
January 1st.
Though it's kind of like it has, because everybody and their dog who makes and sells suppressors has said, hey, we're going to go out of business and before January 1st, because no one's going to buy a suppressor between now and the time when they no longer have to pay $200. So everyone, all those vendors, manufacturers are offering basically a $200 rebate or credit, when like they'll pay the tax stamp for you in order to continue to get your business between now and the end of the year.
And that's not really that unusual. That kind of promotions
comes and goes
for years. Yeah.
But it's going to be in place until January 1st, I promise.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yep. And so we'll see how these cases, move forward as far as suing or challenging the constitutionality of the NFA. So we'll keep an eye on that and update you in future legislative updates episodes.
Yes.
So as I was teasing a moment ago, the Supreme Court recently has rejected some major cases. A couple of those have to do with magazine capacity limits. And that's actually, I think, where I'd like to start right now. And this is something I'm very much interested in. I know you are too, Jacob. And we got cases out of California. We got cases out of Washington State. I think there's also one that I don't know that it's at this level yet, but there's some cases that are working through lower courts from Oregon's recent law, changes. You got a case out of Rhode Island. That's the Ocean State Tactical v. Rhode Island case I mentioned a moment ago. And then we live here in Colorado, where we've had a magazine capacity limit of 15 rounds, or at least 15 rounds or less, for the last 12 years, actually. So this is something that's very, very much of interest to me. But Supreme Court recently denied petitions on a couple of magazine capacity cases, as well as a challenge against semi-automatic rifles like AR-15s. So, I mean, what's your take on this news?
I think there's some context that's highly relevant here to discuss this. I think we first have to see what's happening right now as a unprecedented number of gun control fights taking place in courtrooms in America. So, I mean, go back and listen to this podcast in 2017, 2020, 2022, and what you'd hear is a whole lot of in this legislative update episode is us talking about proposed and or passed state laws. Yep. This state did this state did this, representative so-and-so proposed X. And on occasion, certainly, there was a court decision. Oh, the 10th Circuit Court did this, the Supreme Court did that. But this is unbelievable. Like what's going on right now is crazy. I mean, every week I'm seeing that some district court, federal district court or U.S. appeal court has just ruled on some gun-related thing for some district of America. Like it's constant. It's happening all the time. And I think if we had a good tally of those, which maybe I should work on that, we would find that most of them are gun rights wins. The majority rule in favor of gun rights. Not all of them, but the majority do. But there's enough that don't, that there's conflicts constantly. There's conflicts on all of these topics. Well, not all, but many of these topics. Certainly whether or not banning AR-15s is constitutional or not. Okay, we have district courts that disagree on that. Whether or not restricting 18 to 20-year-olds, adults from being able to purchase any gun or handguns or ammo, whether or not that's constitutional or not. We have conflicting court decisions, a ton of those, by the way.
Yep.
And I think we're going to talk about that again later today. And we have tons of other stuff too. Magazine capacity limitations, certainly. But we've had 2 district courts rule in the last couple of months whether or not a state can restrict non-residents from applying for a permit. California and New York, that's come up. And in both cases, it was ruled that you cannot restrict non-residents. So now California and New York have to offer non-resident concealed carry permits. So my point is just that there's this like, look at it in the context of like, holy crap, like there's a ton going on. You mentioned California as well, but I mean, let's just look at California in recent time. California, it's unconstitutional to not issue non-resident permits. Stop it. Ninth Circuit. Hey, California, it's not constitutional to limit to people to only buying 1 gun a month. Stop it. Next, hey, California, it's not constitutional to ban guns from being in advertising. So stop it. And then, just what is it? I'm just pulling up. July 26th. Hey, Ninth Circuit Court. Hey, California, it's not constitutional to run background checks for people to buy ammo. That's like 4 or 5 California things that have all been happening in district courts in recent time. So I'm just trying to like paint this picture. Now, imagine now with that context, like understanding all this crap going on, picture the Supreme Court and them looking at all this and being like, oh crap. Like this is loaded. This is heavy. Like there's a lot going on. And so we've seen them say no to a lot of gun things this year, not just these 2 recent ones that address magazines and AR-15 bans. We've seen them say no to the 18 to 20-year-old stuff. We've also seen them say no to there was something else that was a big deal that it was on the tip of my tongue. Well, crap.
I wish I knew which one you were thinking of. And I'll just chime in real quick right now. Like there's so much of this going on. It's hard to actually keep up with all of it and to even like keep a lot of it straight. There's so many cases that are moving through the courts of all levels right now. It's insane. And that's kind of the big question here to ask. And in one of the articles we reference in our show notes today from the NRA's Institute for Legislative Action, they basically asked the question right there. What is the court, referencing the Supreme Court, waiting for to take up these questions? What are they waiting for? And I think it's, a couple of things, Jacob. I think number one, that I don't think the Supreme Court justices are blind to what's going on. I think they're very much aware of what's going on in the federal courts on this issue, on Second Amendment issues. I think they're watching it pretty, very closely. And I think they're also picking and choosing and looking for and waiting for the right case or cases to come before them. And we also have to understand that they can only take so many cases in a given year. We're talking about a court that's only 9 justices. Yes, they have quite a staff that assists them with, all of these things, but it's still 9 people that have to hear arguments, have to hear these cases. They only have so much time in the day. And I think it's somewhere around 80 to 90 cases a year that they're really able to hear. And you think about 9 people and what's involved in some of these cases, like that's a lot more work than I think most of us realize to be able to even take that many cases. And so, but at the same time, we have some justices that are on our side, like Justice Thomas and Kavanaugh and others that, they're chomping at the bit. Like some of them have made it very clear, like they're ready. Like Justice Thomas, this is a great quote from this article on the NRAILA.org. He says, "I would not wait to decide whether the government can ban the most popular rifle in America." I love how that starts. He's got a great point. "That question is of critical importance to tens of millions of law-abiding AR-15 owners throughout the country. We have avoided deciding it for a full decade." That's how Justice Thomas feels about it. That's pretty strong.
Yeah.
And then I referenced earlier Brett Kavanaugh, who he says this: "Opinions from other courts of appeals should assist this court's ultimate decision making on the AR-15 issue." Additional petitions for certiorari will likely be before this court shortly. And in my view, this court should and presumably will address the AR-15 issue soon, in the next term or two. So the writing's on the wall is essentially what Justice Kavanaugh is saying, that we're gonna have to deal with this. It's coming. There's enough other stuff going on in the federal courts, in the appeals courts, that we're gonna have to deal with this. And he's saying in the next term or two, so in the next year or two.
Yeah.
So pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, I don't pretend to understand all the things that go into making a decision to hear a case. I mean, I think there's some things that are clear and obvious, but beyond that, I really don't pretend to know. But it's coming, I think, to your point. I wanted to clarify, the one thing I couldn't remember is they did refuse to hear a case recently on New York's sensitive places thing. The Concealed Carry Improvement Act, whether or not that is constitutional. So that was the thing I was trying to remember.
Yeah.
So anyway, yes, like I think, and all the big pro 2A rights organizations and groups of attorney generals from various states and governors, and the cool thing to do right now is to write a petition or a writ or whatever they're called, fancy legal thing, begging the Supreme Court to take up a certain issue. And we're certainly, like, the organizations that our listeners are members of, the GOA, the FBC, like SA, whatever, like the NRA, like all these organizations, they're all doing their job at writing the things to say, please, Supreme Court, like, take this up now. So we're seeing plenty of that too.
Yeah. Now, here's another interesting thing. And I know that even within our own listenership, there are those that are not necessarily fans of the Trump administration, or maybe President Trump himself. I don't know. But I'm going to just make a comment here. And that is that elections have consequences. And like Trump or not like Trump, if you are a fan of the Second Amendment, you should be a fan of what's going on at the Department of Justice and the ATF and other federal agencies, because we're starting to see a trend. And I can't remember what the other case is right now off the top of my head, but we have one right here. The article is how the DOJ declines to seek Supreme Court review of the decision, striking down federal laws prohibiting dealers from selling handguns to 18 to 20-year-olds. Like, that's not entirely unprecedented, but it's not common that when you have federal cases that initially maybe were started with charges being levied against someone for breaking federal law, like selling a gun to someone underage, or someone underage acquiring a gun, like a handgun, let's say, outside of the normal legal challenge or channels of doing that. And so what I'm saying is, you got the Department of Justice that has prosecuted people for violations of laws like this, and the court cases, we have a change of administration, and a lot of times, court cases are still taking place. They're still moving forward, and this is an example of one. It was the Reese case, all right, which involved. And there's also one that you've got going on out of Florida. Now, this is not what this one's about, but this is a big case out of Florida called NRA v. Glass. That's another one that's dealing with the same type of issue. And there's a few others. And it even says here, we're dealing with cases like this in the 4th, 10th, and 11th circuits, and cases like this also in the 3rd, 5th, and 8th circuits. And so the 4th, 10th, and 11th circuits have upheld restrictions for handgun purchases for those under the age of 21. And the 3rd, 5th, and 8th circuits have rendered those restrictions unconstitutional. So we have basically 3 circuit courts and three that have said it's constitutional and it's unconstitutional. It's like, boom, like, this is another major issue that is going to probably land on Supreme Court desks pretty soon too. But meanwhile, the Reese versus ATF case out of the 5th Circuit was one of those that was rendered unconstitutional. And normally what would happen is you would have the government would say, well, we're going to appeal that. And basically the Department of Justice is saying, nope, we're cool with that.
Yeah.
So like this is pretty interesting to see that, you have the Department of Justice, you got attorneys general, and others in the federal government that are basically saying, yeah, we're not going to keep pursuing these gun related cases.
Yeah.
So
you got to think of it like the U.S. government, the Department of Justice, is the like the entity that's involved in these cases. They're the organization that's being sued, or they're the organization who's making the decision to take it or fight it. So you have several of these where the DOJ is saying, "We'll take it." Right before Biden's administration was fighting it. I'll give you another example. We just talked about the 18 to 20-year-olds. Another one would be good old pistol braces. So pistol braces, all sorts of drama with the pistol brace, right? Biden administration directs the ATF to say that they're now illegal, and so then lawsuits happen, and a federal district court says, "No, ATF, you can't do this," and then DOJ says, "Oh no, we're going to fight this. We're going to make sure that pistol braces go away." Trump comes in, appoints a new attorney general. Attorney general's like, "Nope, we're good. Never mind. We take it back. Like, we're happy to let the court's decision stand." As opposed to before we said we were going to fight it. So same thing here, where DOJ is saying, well, we have the ability, the right, maybe previously it indicated that we were going to appeal this decision and take it up to the Supreme Court. And now we're taking a step back like, no, we're good with the decision how it was. And in both these examples, that's a pro-gun rights decision.
Yeah. And so that's what we're talking about here today, is just that we have currently an executive branch of the government that is taking a huge step back from pursuing various challenges against laws and or prosecutions even against individuals in certain cases. And then, that's a huge win for all of us, frankly. It probably will not always remain so, because obviously with a new administration, priorities and directives will end up changing. But right now, this is really, really good news. It also means that when, like, say, the Fifth Circuit Court hands down a decision, that decision as it applies within that circuit a lot of times is going to remain in effect because it's not going to be challenged further. And so that's going to have some pretty significant repercussions as well. And that's where, I think this ruling out of the Fifth Circuit will stay in place. Meanwhile, you have these other, like the Fourth Circuit and 10th and 11th Circuits that have competing decisions, opposite decisions. And so, again, another major issue that at some point I would like to think the Supreme Court ends up needing to do something about it, because you've got half the country essentially that's like, in terms of federal courts that are like, this is okay, and nope, this is not okay. Talking about these types of issues, and so, it could very well be that, and for some of us in certain federal circuits, the law of the land may very well be that 18 to 20-year-olds can purchase a handgun legally themselves.
Yeah.
So
this is one the Supreme Court is going to have to take up. Of all these topics we've mentioned so far in this episode, this is the one that has the most conflict.
It's the most split.
Yeah, in the district courts, the most rulings and the most splits. So that they're going to have to sort. It's their job to sort this out.
Yep. Absolutely. So that's a pretty interesting one. I like seeing that. Anything else on the federal level we should discuss before we move on to some state issues?
Yeah, I don't know. We have a lawsuit right now trying to prevent USPS from banning the shipment of guns in the mail. I mentioned some other things there too. I'm trying to think. Oh, New Mexico is worth mentioning. So New Mexico, the 10th Circuit Court just struck down.
Waiting day period?
Yeah, New Mexico's waiting period.
Yeah.
Wait, that's on our list. Oh, we are going to talk about that. Yeah, I guess I just spoiled it, so I think we've talked.
Well, let's jump to that then.
Yeah.
All right. So New Mexico, kind of a big deal. This is a huge victory because there have been states, and there are currently states like Washington is one of them. Now it's, again, these things all have to work their own ways through courts sometimes, but New Mexico had a 7-day waiting period on the books on law. That was a law, and the 10th Circuit Court in a 2-1 decision just said that waiting period is unconstitutional. This is big. I remember as a younger lad learning when I first learned about at that time. I remember it was Virginia that had a waiting period on purchases, and it was like 10 days or something like that. And I remember like as a young, teen, going on to like 17, 18, 19 years old. And that, I remember it was about how old I was at the time, and just thinking like, that's crazy. Like you go in and buy a gun and you got to wait 10 days and go back and pick it up, And like at that time, this is, we're talking right around the turn of the century, still, maybe in the back in the 1900s, maybe you're about the year 2000. And that was common, maybe not common as far as we didn't have a ton of states that had waiting period laws like that, but it was just sort of like accepted. Like it was like, well, that's too bad. I know there was probably some challenges that were going on with stuff like that, but the makeup of the courts and everything was very different compared to how it is now. And I think even people's attitudes about Second Amendment issues, part of that maybe was because we had just come, or we were still really in the throes of the Clinton era, magazine restrictions and things like that, assault weapons ban, and I think that a lot of Americans were just like, yeah, well, that's the way it is now. At least that's how I perceive remembering it from that time, And so the fact that to have a major ruling come down from the 10th Circuit saying, yeah, waiting periods, they suck. They're done for. They're out. Unconstitutional. It's a big deal.
Yeah, and it's hard to say how this is going to impact other states that have waiting periods. The source I have been looking at lists the following states as having a waiting period: California 10 days, Colorado 3 days, DC 10 days, Florida 3 days, Hawaii 14 days, Illinois and Maine 3 days each, New Mexico 7 days, Rhode Island 7 days, Vermont 3 days, Washington 10 business days. So, that's what, 11, 12 states that have some sort of waiting period. And so now a court has said, specific to New Mexico's law, that's a no-go. But, the 10th Circuit also covers Colorado. It also covers, it's probably the only other state that the 10th Circuit covers that currently has a waiting period. But it's unclear at this time, like how that will roll out. Because the 10th Circuit didn't say all waiting periods are unconstitutional. They said this particular law in New Mexico that says you have to wait 7 days, that's not constitutional. Yep. So it doesn't reach beyond New Mexico yet, but it's a good indicator, for future potential court decisions on this topic. And I think we'll see more lawsuits starting to get spun up on this in these other states now.
Yeah. And you did a write-up on this on our website. And one of the things I really liked here is you were quoting, well, it wasn't a direct quote, but referencing what Judge Timkovich, I think is how you pronounce his name, who was he wrote the majority opinion in this case. Yes, it was split. It was 2-1. So, it wasn't unanimous, but, this sort of thing does bode hopefully well for potentially challenging things like our 3-day waiting period thing here in Colorado. But anyway, he said something to the effect of comparing the burden of waiting a week to get a gun to the burden of a 1-week delay on free speech or church attendance, suggesting such delays would be obviously unconstitutional. And that's exactly right. That's exactly what this is. It's like, it's either a constitutional right or it's not. And I think with some of the older tests of Second Amendment related constitutional issues that were, we weighed these kind of more weighted tests of, well, how much of the burden is there really versus, the necessity of protecting the public's safety. But now with decisions, especially like the Bruin decision, clarified a lot of this in a big way. But building upon Heller decision and others like that, it's a constitutional right or it's not. And there's no test that exists of, other than, hey, are we infringing upon a right to a constitutionally protected activity here, which is purchasing or owning or possessing a firearm or not. And yeah, we don't impose waiting periods on free speech. So pretty interesting comparison there.
Yeah. Yeah. 2 thumbs up for me.
Yeah.
No more waiting period. Kill them all.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't speak to a specific one example right now, but I know I've heard of stories of, people that have, been in like domestic violence type situations that were able to defend themselves immediately because they were able to immediately purchase a firearm. I don't know if there's anything on the other side of that where someone was killed because they were waiting on a firearm purchase, to go through or not. But I know I have heard, and we should maybe dig something of that up a little bit more specifically, because I think having some of those specific examples would be really, compelling. But I know I have heard of situations where, particularly like a woman was able to defend herself because she felt like she was immediately, under threat, and purchased a gun, and then like later that day used it in defense. So kind of a big deal, I think.
Yeah.
Out of North Carolina, there's 2 pro-gun bills that passed through the House and Senate, no problem. One was essentially a constitutional carry bill, and then the other has to do with
it's like educational property, so it's sort of like school carry, right, but it's way more nuanced than your traditional campus carry bill.
Right.
So don't read too much in. Like, there's a lot of deep in the weeds on that one, but yeah.
Well, I think that there's some nuance even in the Senate Bill 50, which is the constitutional carry one as well. I haven't been able to find a ton of details on that. I did a little bit of digging and I gave up. I just didn't have the kind of time to really dig into that. But the NRA seems to imply, this is according to the NRA Institute for Legislative Action, that there's some pitfalls that could entrap well-intentioned gun owners, even with that bill. But there's still, hopefully, steps in the right direction. And what you have is a pretty strong majority in the House and Senate in North Carolina that's pro-gun. But you have a governor that's not. And so what's happened with House Bill 193, which is the school on-campus carry bill, is they overcame the governor's veto, which requires a 3/5 majority in both the Senate and the House to overcome that veto, much like many other states have, right? And so they were able to overcome that one, no problem. So on-campus carry, that's the law of the land in North Carolina now.
Well, it goes into effect in December, I think. But yeah,
right. But I mean that the law is passed. Thank you for clarifying. It goes into effect. Then this is how it usually is with such things. They don't usually go into effect right away. There's usually some kind of time frame where they go into effect later on. But the constitutional carry one is not quite there yet. But I do know they have a vote on September 22nd in the House. It looks like I think the Senate has overridden that veto on their side. So correct, now they need 3/5 of the House to vote on September 22nd to get that veto over, officially overridden, so that bill also becomes the law of the land in North Carolina. So if that's important enough to you and you're a North Carolinian, you might consider contacting your representatives and let them know that how you stand and where you stand and how you want them to vote, because that's going down in just a few weeks here.
It's been delayed at least once, maybe twice.
Yeah.
So it's high time to override the veto and get it done.
Yeah. Yep. And that, assuming that happens, that would make, and again, it's a little bit, I think, more of a nuanced constitutional carry law than maybe some states. Some states are like very like, you're over the age of 18 and you're not a felon. You can carry a gun, concealed, open, doesn't matter. But the point is it's I think a step in the right direction, and it'll make them the 30th state with some kind of constitutional carry provision, which is a big deal. That's basically almost 2/3 of states. So that's pretty cool.
Yep.
I'm going to come back to the Arkansas one, Jacob, a little bit here in just a minute. Let's jump down to this story out of Texas. I found this quite interesting, and that's why I dropped it in our notes here today to cover, because Texas passed a law, which is cool, that basically said gun turn-in events, particularly ones that are like government sponsored, against the law. And so, I know those of you that are Texans or are fans of Texas are probably like, yeah, of course it's Texas. Anyway, so they passed a law that made it illegal to have a gun turn-in event or gun buybacks or something of that nature.
Yeah.
And so, what caught my attention here is that El Paso County, where El Paso, Texas, is located, is holding one more gun turn-in event before the new state law takes effect on September 1st, which is this coming Monday, as of recording this episode. So I'm just like, man, that's I don't know. I just think that's wild to me. Gives you a sense of, I mean, even in a state like Texas, we know this. I don't know if everybody knows this. I know that some people like assume Texas is just this red bastion of conservatism and pro-gunness, and that certainly is the feeling you get when you think about Texas. But it's a lot more of a nuanced state than you would think, and there's definitely some deeply blue pockets in Texas, and El Paso is one of those pockets. And so, anyway, they're having a big gun buy-in / turn-in / buyback, whatever event. They got to squeeze it in before that no longer is allowed in the state of Texas.
I don't think I've never seen any research or data that anyone has ever put together to even like attempt to imply that these gun buybacks are at all effective. So, good riddance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm with you there.
I have seen some good data and reports from people who stand across the street from gun buybacks and are able to greatly build their gun collection by picking up items from people before they go in and get their $25 Target gift card.
Right. Actually, in referencing this article on nraila.org, it gives a couple examples of things that are worth knowing. In gun-controlled Chicago, it says a Glock from a 2023 turn-in vanished from police custody and was later used in 3 shootings before being recovered from a 16-year-old boy.
Excellent work, gentlemen.
Yeah, I mean, like if the government / police department, which is the government, does a gun buyback and then can't somehow manage to actually maintain control of those bought back guns, because obviously something happened there for it to end up in the hands of a 16-year-old kid, gangbanger. So, and then it references here, even an Obama Department of Justice memo back in 2013 says that gun turn-ins are ineffective. That's pretty, I never heard that before. I thought that was interesting. And then a gun turn-in program in Maine, which was held by the Maine Gun Safety Coalition, nearly had deadly consequences when organizers negligently discharged a loaded muzzle loader at their gun buyback event. So, yeah, anyway, good for you, El Paso County. I'm glad you guys are getting that done one last time. Arkansas, this is not your traditional legislative news story, Jacob, but I think it's sort of bringing some attention to what could be a push for legislation on the pro-gun side.
Yes.
So a few weeks ago, I remember seeing this in the news. I mean, it got flashed all over the major networks and national level news websites and stuff. But there was this couple, a married couple, that was attacked randomly, apparently, by someone that didn't know him. This guy, right? They're with their, I think it was like 2 daughters they had with them, and they're in a state park in Arkansas hiking, enjoying the outdoors, and all of a sudden, this guy just attacks them and stabs them to death. Amazingly, so actually, what happened? I know that the father, likely probably trying to defend his family, he's the one that takes it first, and he gets stabbed, and he's very obviously, I mean, he dies, presumably pretty quickly. The mother works really hard to get her daughters, her kids protected, to get them away. She went back to then check on / defend her husband, and at that point is when she becomes the focus of this violent attacker's attack, and he kills her. And so it's a terrible, horrible story. And so what this was talking about, I think it was a worthwhile article, again, on the NRAILA's website, just talking about, hey, we have places, when we're talking about carrying of a firearm, whether it's concealed or openly even. Sometimes like you might have a state where it's allowed to carry concealed in that, well, everyone's technically supposed to be able to carry concealed in all states now, but we have these, protected places and sensitive locations and things, right? That, like you brought up about New York, that's a big deal there. California is dealing with that. Hawaii is dealing with sensitive places stuff.
It's the new politically correct term for a gun-free zone.
Exactly. So the point here is like this story it highlights the issue with such a line of thinking. It's like, hey, yeah, you can carry concealed here, but in this state park you can't. And I'm not saying that was the case with Arkansas here. I don't think that was the case at all. But it quotes the state police colonel, Mike Hagar, saying, the more good people we have with weapons and the ability to defend themselves, the better we all are. And he expressed his concerns with gun-free zones within state parks. And so what this is really highlighting is saying, it says here that concealed carry with a permit in state parks is allowed in Arkansas, but that they can exclude certain buildings. And we deal with that on the federal level, Jacob, where there's states based on that state's law that you can carry concealed in a national park, or maybe even openly in maybe certain states, but you can't carry in federal buildings.
It becomes impractical. Like you have to think for like a practical perspective, right? Like the closest national park to me is probably Rocky Mountain National Park, which is it's a top 20 like traffic national park.
Yeah.
It's a lot of visitors every year. And because it's located in Colorado, you then therefore can take a gun with you into Rocky Mountain National Park. But you can't take it into any buildings. You can't take it to a visitor center. You can't take it into the ranger station. You probably can't take it into a porta potty dang near. So what that creates is an environment where if you're trying to be law abiding, you're sort of like, man, it's just not practical. Like I can't, like if I go on a hike, I'm going to stop by this building first. I'm going to use the restroom. Maybe I'm going to buy a poncho because it's raining, and then I'm going to go out for this hike. Well, so you're not going to take your gun if you're law abiding, because while you might be able to have it out on that trail, you can't have it in that building. You're constantly stopping. Like for anybody who's ever visited a national park, you're constantly going in and out of buildings. Mm-hmm. If you're staying in the park for any period of time, you might even be staying in a hotel or something like that's owned by the feds. That's part of the park. The last national park I visited was Yellowstone. Mm-hmm. And I stayed in two places inside Yellowstone National Park overnight. And both those buildings, firearms are not allowed. Right. So it becomes a matter of practicality, right? Like I guess I just won't take my gun, or I'll keep it in the car all the time, because there's no real practical way to actually have it on me consistently all the time, because I'll be in and out of all these buildings where it's prohibited. And I think that's the stage that's kind of being served up for potential legislation. It's like, wait a minute, like, there is progress here, right? Because up until 2010, you couldn't take a firearm into anything operated by the National Park Service, period. No way, no how. And that changed to allow it to some degree, but the change is not significant enough. It has not gone far enough to make it practical and doable. I think that's the point.
Yes. Yep. And I completely agree. And I would say, I think it's worth having the conversation also about other federal facilities that regularly provide services to the public. Post offices is one thing I'm thinking of. Like that again, it's like, okay, so I got to go, run to such and such, place today. I got to stop by the Social Security office, let's say. Well, I guess I'm not going to carry my gun today, because that's just too much effort to get there and have to disarm myself and put it away, and and I get shot on my way home. It's like the point is like we are either we the people or we're not, and that we can be trusted as law-abiding citizens to carry a legal firearm or not. And I think we ought to have the right to protect ourselves anywhere and anyhow we go. But interesting story out of Arkansas, and it does draw attention to an interesting sticking point with a lot of these kinds of, I would say, non-common sense laws.
Yeah.
So, well, we're at the end here of needing to wrap things up. I know Jacob's got to be on his way to an appointment. That's, I think, all the stories we had to cover today. I hope something along the way here spoke to you listeners or viewers, and be involved. Get involved in your local politics. People running for office that you want to support. Be willing to speak to your neighbors and family and friends about important issues to you. I think that's one of the ways that we win fights, is by being good, responsible, reasonable people, and just day by day, little by little, person to person, having these conversations about important issues. And everything we talked about today, I think, are important issues. Any last words, Jacob?
I'll just encourage people to make sure you have our app downloaded so that you can keep track of these kinds of news updates. We write about the majority of these issues when they come out. In fact, we added a new category within our blog on concealedcarry.com recently called court decisions, because this was such an upcoming thing. It's like there's just so many court decisions that it makes sense to have a page, an archive on the site where you can just find those. So you can always go to concealedcarry.com, and in the read, watch, listen menu, you can click on all articles, and then within that you can navigate to what you're looking for. But I think that it's just important to be aware of what's going on, and I think our app makes that about as convenient as it could be. Going to our website is always nice, and it's easier to comment and interact and do some other things on the website, certainly. But the mobile app is a great resource for these things, and of course has other tools in there also.
Yeah, good stuff. You taught me something about our website I didn't know, that we have a whole category dedicated to such things. So very, very cool. Folks, appreciate your support of us, concealedcarry.com, the podcast, everything we do. Remember our sponsors today were Gunfighter Gun Oil, gunfightergunoil.com, and tacticalrx.com. And we got, in the next few weeks, our Guardian Conference coming up. We're going to be really busy. We'll do our best to get the podcast to you in a timely fashion. But if not, my apologies in advance. I know we've missed a couple episodes the last few weeks. But anyway, we've got lots going on. And in fact, if you are able to still make the Guardian Conference, please come join us. Hope to see you there. It's a good time. Until next time, a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.